Hi there, welcome to another episode of Harrison Hobbies. Today I have tried some new accessories here. We've got a bookshelf now with some swag, give ourselves a little bit of a cool backdrop. We've got a barn door light up there. I got some feedback that my audio sucked, so now we're trying a lavalier mic. We got a wireless Rode transmitter, so we'll check that out. Additionally, instead of having a big monitor kind of showing me doing my live view, I've now got a little screen above my camera, so hopefully it'll look like I'm making a little bit better eye contact with the camera. But let's get into it. So in front of me here we have the HP Spectre Folio 13. I've had this computer now for a few weeks. The day I got it, I did an unboxing, super quick first look at it, and you can probably find a link to that posted somewhere in the video here. So now that I've used it, I have identified some issues. The first issue being that it does do a ton of thermal throttle. Because it is the passively cooled design, whenever you give it heavy workloads, you'll tend to see the CPU percentage drop down to around 0.79 gigahertz. So I think that's probably about the minimum that this CPU can handle, but I think I do have one solve for that, and we'll cover that at the end of the video. After having used this now, I wanted to compare it to some other machines I have. So the Acer Swift 1 here has Pentium Silver N5000 CPU, so I wanted to review this because, again, this has, in my opinion, probably a pretty similar processor, right? They're both passively cooled. So we're going to see, this is a $300 computer. What does an extra $1,000 buy you? Quite a bit in terms of aesthetics and feel and a backlit keyboard, touchscreen. But in terms of performance, more, not a ton more. We've also got the HP Spectre Folio itself here, which has the i7-10510Y. So that's the Y series passively cooled. We'll get into more of the specs here in a minute. We've also got the Alienware M15R1, which comes with the i7-8750H, and then lastly we have the Dell Inspiron here. It's 13-inch with an i3 7 series, so it's a i3 710U, and so these are all kind of reflecting. We've got U series, H series, Y series, and the super low budget Pentium. I feel like all four of these reflect the spectrum, right? I mean, they're all different generations, but we've got the Pentium, we've got an H series, we've got a U series, and we've got a Y series. So we're kind of covering the gamut here of everything that Intel has to offer. So when I got this, the original intention was to basically replace my Alienware and my Inspiron. The Alienware has i7 H series, the Inspiron has i3 7th gen U series, and so I was hoping that the Y series here, in theory, could give us maybe some of the best of both worlds, right? Long battery life, but a little bit of oomph. So my intention was video editing here. It was also going to be running some SolidWorks, doing word processing. After I started using it, though, became very disappointed. It really, really struggles under CPU-intensive tasks. And to be honest, I'm kind of surprised that HP would let this hit the market, especially at such a premium. The computer doesn't really do anything well except for look really cool. It's got decent battery life, but again, it's relatively thin. It has a small battery. It has a lot of burst processing power, and that would be expected with a 10th gen i7. It's got, a great screen. But whenever you put them all together, you end up with a product that, in my opinion, really isn't worth it. So before we get into testing, I kind of wanted to cover super quick, like, should you buy it? And that might save you some view time whenever we benchmark all these, kind of a drag race, and show how the CPU actually functions and scenarios that will cause it to thermal throttle. So full disclaimer, after I got it and I'd used it for a week or two, I decided that I was going to send it back to HP. It doesn't have enough performance to actually warrant the price tag, in my opinion. My wife saw it, she loved it, and my 3-year-old also happens to like it. I don't know if the camera can pick that up, but we've got lots of 3-year-old fingerprints on here. It does well for what she uses it for, which is a little bit of PowerPoint, word processing, a lot of Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, and a little bit of social media. So in that case, it does well. But if you actually expect this computer to do anything productive, forget about it. One other feature that I did want to point out, and we'll zoom in here in a second, but Nguyen had posted a question on one of the comments on how does the stylus hold. And so we're going to zoom in here and then we'll get a quick look at that. In my opinion, this is not going to be a weak point. It's held in here. It's got this little bit of plastic back here, and this is super compliant. It'll bend however you need it to. And the stylus fitting into here is fine. The one drawback that I have seen here is depending on how you insert the pen, and if we have the cable, again, I'm using a MacBook Air charger here since that's what I had. But if you were to put it in, how is this? You know, if you're not paying attention and you end up putting the pen here and it goes forward and you try to push it down, you can see there is a ton of flex on that, and you're either going to break the pen holder, or I guess maybe break the power adapter, but again, I wouldn't expect that. So, you know, simple, you got to just return the screen, kind of push it up until it's clear, and then go. So that's really the only flaw with having the pen holder right there. But overall, yeah, this has, again, been used now a little bit. But the only thing that I was concerned with the buttons on the pen was the fact that, you know, maybe putting them into here was going to cause issue. Again, they glide in pretty well, so I don't really expect any major issue there. And you have to actually depress the buttons quite a bit to actuate them. So even whenever you're putting it in, you're not going to be accidentally hitting buttons. But you can see, I mean, it just kind of inherently slides right over that power adapter if you're not paying attention. And again, you can charge from this side, so maybe that's a way to solve, but it seems kind of like a shortcoming on their part for that. So we'll review some of the other things that I've kind of noticed on here. The first is the speakers on here profoundly suck. I didn't even believe that it was the internal speakers. I thought it was something external, just because I'd been listening to this for the past few minutes, and I was blown away. So if you're with it sitting in front of you like this, coming at you, it sucks. It gets a lot worse whenever you put it into the tent mode here, because now it's blasting the audio out of the side here, and you know, it's muffled to you, and the people to your sides are going to hear that crappy audio. So we'll listen to the audio here real quick. So I don't get hit with a copyright thing, we'll just listen to one of my most recent videos here. And you can hear that there is no bass. The highs are super shrill. Overall, it's just generally unpleasant to listen to. Even spoken voice here is not super great. And this is full volume. If you end up going down, it's more tolerable, but it's still not great. We'll get into the specs of these once we start it, but I wanted to have a quick drag race in Cinebench. Because this laptop here is primarily CPU powerful, we'll say, because it doesn't have any real integrated graphics cards to speak of, I wanted to focus on a benchmark that would tax that and not necessarily rely on graphics, because I don't think it would be fair to take a laptop that doesn't have dedicated graphics, either Intel Xe or NVIDIA or ATI, and compare that against other machines. We're focusing here primarily on CPU. We'll dive in. So all of these we're going to run, these are all Cinebench R23. We are running stress test off, so we're just going to do one quick run of all of these. We'll see how we do. Keep this here so we can monitor its benchmark. So for some quick specs here, we have the Dell Inspiron. This is going to have an i3 7100U. So that's going to be a 7th gen i3 U-series processor. U-series is going to refer to typically power consumption. So this is an ultralight, we'll call it quote unquote, processor here. It's going to have a 15 watt TDP. And so I've, again, done some of the CPU investigative softwares, and it comes in about that whenever graphics is also in play. So it runs a little bit under its TDP. Basically, all of these run under their TDP pretty typically in CPU intensive tasks. But this is going to be a 2.4 gigahertz base clock, 2-core, 4-thread processor. Compare that to the Alienware M15R1. This has an 8th gen 8750H CPU, which H is going to be your gaming laptop or heavy duty, perhaps workstation processor you could call it. So this is our Alienware M15R1. It has an 8750H processor in it. The H processor is going to cap out at around 45 watts, but Alienware has these tuned so they can actually hit a peak of 60 watts, so it's way more powerful than anything else here. This one is going to be a 6-core, 12-thread, and a 2.2 base, but it typically turbos up to around 4.5-ish gigahertz. This is going to be our Spectre Folio here. This has the i7 10510Y with a 1.2 gigahertz base clock. It's going to run around 7 watt typical, 9 watt max. Again, I've gone in and looked at what's pulling wattage on this, and typically the CPU only hits around 5 watts on here. If you're doing something CPU intensive, whenever you pull in graphics and stuff, that's whenever you're pushing it up to 9 watts. But even then, it gets pretty warm. From this, I mean, we can see the Alienware is already done with its first run. We're maybe a third of the way done here, maybe a little more than that, and this guy we're probably going to have finished right at the end of the show. And then this is going to be a 4-core 8-thread on the HP here. And then lastly, the Acer Swift 1. And the only reason I included this was, again, this is an 8th gen Pentium processor, and it is a similar wattage to the HP here. So this one is going to be a 1.1 gigahertz, a 6 watt typical. So from that, again, we see around 3 to 4 watts versus the 5 here. And it's going to be a 4-core with no hyper-threading. So this is a straight up 4. This is the equivalent of 8. Our Dell here is the equivalent of 12, and this would be back here the equivalent of 4. So we'll get some quick Cinebench benchmarks here. 1.91, 1.92. This one here, again, it goes a lot higher in terms of clock, but it's not putting out very much performance. We compare that. This thing is already done. It is, and it scored 6,609, 6609 points on that one. And this one is still going. It's running a 2.39. So we're going to stop, and then we'll come back here in a couple of minutes once some of this stuff has actually had a chance to run. So we wanted to check in here. The HP just finished running it. It got a score of 2283, 2283. So roughly a third of what the Alienware does, which is pretty good. We will make sure that we take a couple of minutes toward the end here, and we'll show what kind of workload you actually have to have in order to get that dropping below the 1.9-ish gigahertz that it is running at on a CPU-only workload like this. Really quick, while these two final machines are wrapping up their run, I wanted to rerun the HP here with this. So, because the bottom of this computer is leather, doing a cooling pad, something like that, isn't going to do any good for you. There's no intakes on the bottom. The bottom is, for all intents and purposes, thermally insulated. So you really need something that's going to interface here with the heatsink, and that is toasty. So I've got a little centrifuge blower here. These can be had for what, like $5, $6, $7 on Amazon, and it plugs in with USB-A here. So the intention is, we'll close this guy since we're not doing anything with him anymore. So the intention here is going to be to hook this thing up, and then we're going to blow some air over the heatsink. And we'll rerun it and see if we get another one. So as a reminder here, we are at 2283, and we'll hook this up and then we'll rerun it. So got this, we're blowing air across the whole thing, and then we'll get some thermal image here also of it. So we will hit start. Now, just for reference, this scored 1,012 points. So that's more or less what you'd expect from an i3 7th gen processor. But it was, again, about a third, maybe a little less than a third of what that machine could do. So even though that is passively cooled Y-series processor, for CPU-only tasks, that is still going to be quite a bit faster. We'll close this. We'll stack it. I wanted to run a quick FLIR test so we can check and see what we're getting here. We can see the red dots. Can we see the red dots? Yes, we can. So we can see the red dots here showing what exactly we're looking at. We're hitting around 113, 115 degrees on the back here. If we look at the keyboard here, it's almost all cool. So basically 100% of your cooling is happening right up here in the grill, and it looks like the CPU is more or less centered here, perhaps justified a little bit to the left. Conversely, if we look here, we're running around what, mid 70s. So I mean 80. This, again, you can tell the CPU is going to be right in this area right here on the Acer. Not much over here, but it is running super cool. It's a lot less powerful. On the Dell, we've got some inlets for the fans here showing functional. It's not running anymore, but it probably didn't get too much hotter than that. And then lastly, we've got the Dell and the Dell Inspiron, and it's got its duct at the back here. So it's running about 90-ish. So without the fan, it does run a lot hotter, right? There's nothing to be pulling that air away, and it's just relying on convection and radiation here to cool itself. So we've got Premiere here launched. This is going to be another one of my videos that I've been editing, and we'll just scrub through here, and then we'll play. So we're going to let that run, and we are at 1/8 resolution, as you can see right here. And we will turn the volume down so it doesn't overrun me. And we're going to keep it going for a couple of minutes here. And we're going to look at our CPU. So right now we're doing relatively fine. But we can already see it dropping 2.91, or sorry, 1.88, 1.91. And we'll give it a couple of minutes here to warm up, and then we'll check back in here in a second. So some quick specs on here. We ended up with this thing, so we put it into full resolution here. Again, full resolution on a 13-inch laptop doesn't really give you anything. But if I'm editing, I've got a 4K ultra wide, and then I've also got a 2K Alienware high refresh. But both of those start to utilize the higher resolution there. So we're holding still here. So just for reference here, I've been letting this go now for, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 minutes. I kept the door open in this room for quite a while, so it actually cooled off. I would guess it's probably around 60 degrees in here, just because with all the lights and everything, it's kind of nice to have a little bit of coolness. But I've let it run a couple of times. There's no funny business or anything here. The screen here, I have this running in full resolution. This is running 4K video, but it's on the 1080 screen. If this were on a 4K monitor, the effects here are much more pronounced. But in here you can see we're running right now at like 0.95, 0.90. Right before I started recording here, it was down into 0.83. And so you can see here that I'm starting to look really choppy. So this isn't the kind of thing where you can edit a video for a long time. Eventually you suck up all the thermal buffer that you have here, and that's whenever you start to drop. And we'll get this going here. Nope. But maybe this will work here. If you can see that, we can pull this up there. So you can see maybe on here, gradient. Here we're running around 116, 117. Again, right before it started a thermal throttle, I checked it and it was running 122. So I doubt that many people would be often touching up here, but still, and now that the video has ended, you can see progress here. Now we're back up to 1.5, and if we hit play again, it'll probably go for a couple of seconds just fine, and then it'll move back into super stuttery simply because the CPU can't boost high enough in order to play this smoothly. And so now we're 1.21, 1.28, 1.36. GPU is starting to get a little bit heavy here, and I don't know how choppy this is coming across here. It looks still pretty smooth because, again, we're up to 1.4. We're nowhere near its sustained clock, or its quoted sustained clock of 1.51. I guess now we're up to 1.43, 1.47. So it takes a little bit of time. And then if we look here at our CPU monitor, we can see that we are running 8.3 watts. It has a TDP of 7. I think we talked about that a little bit earlier. So theoretically, that package is designed to handle 7. It definitely gets stuttery, and I don't believe that this unit is unique in that stutteriness. I think that this would be a pretty prolific problem across any of these units that you'd get. If you want to be the one that stands out in a crowd and you don't have any real intense applications you're going to be running on this, then this computer is great. If you're expecting to be able to run something like StarCraft, edit some video, do heavy SolidWorks models or AutoCAD models, this is not the computer for you. But as a media consumption machine, you'd probably be better off buying an iPad or maybe a Surface, one of the two-in-ones, or even a Dell. And if you want something powerful, then spend the exact same amount of money. Get yourself an HP Omen or an Alienware, or I mean pretty much any mid-range gaming PC out there. It'll run circles around this. So I appreciate you sticking around, checking this out, hearing my feedback. But if you have any feedback that's different than what I presented here, I'd appreciate it if you'd share it in the comments below. Again, I am just one data point. I'm sure there are folks that are out there who have used this more extensively than I have that can probably speak better to it. And if you have any questions about anything that I covered in this video or anything you wish I would have covered, please, again, leave me a comment. I would love to respond. I enjoy interacting with everybody here. And please, make sure you subscribe. We've got a lot more cool content coming. So thanks for watching, and check back soon for more videos.